So Mr. Trump is making a lot of waves.
Anil?
I think, but these waves are actually, breaking up on the beaches of Europe at the moment.
Anil? It is getting recorded, no?
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah. Hi, Michael. Can you hear me?
Yes,
All
I
right.
can. Good afternoon.
Lovely. Okay, we start now. Dr. Vivek Lall may not be, but he is able to join because of a last-minute meetings and all. But he has sent a recorded message in response to my questions, which we will play after some time. So good evening, India. Good morning, America. Greetings to all friends across geographies who have found time to join this important conversation about the future trajectory of the India-US partnership under the Trump 2.0 presidency. A warm welcome to all of you to this online conference titled The Trump Card, India Choices and Strategy. My name is Manish Chand. I'm CEO and Director, Center for Global India Insights, a think tank focused on global affairs, at India Rights Network, a media publishing organization focused on global affairs. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, we are extremely fortunate to have a star-studded panel comprising eminent figures from the world of diplomacy, business, and the strategic community to discuss this important subject, which is hogging headlines almost every day. Let me introduce our distinguished speakers very briefly. Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, Chancellor Jawaharlal Nehru University, former Foreign Secretary, India. Mr. Mukesh Aghi, President and CEO, US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. Mr. Shalabh Kumar, well-known US industrialist and national chair of Indian and Hindu American coalitions for the Republican Party. Mr. Vivek Lall in absentia, Vivek Lall, Chief Executive, General Atomics Global Corporation. Mr. Michael Kugelman, Chair, South Asia Institute, Wilson Center, United States. And Dr. Harinder Sekhon, author and expert, and a consultant with VIF. None of these speakers need any introduction. I will introduce them in detail when I invite them to speak. Excellencies, eminent speakers, ladies and gentlemen, friends, this conference is part of a series of events we are organizing to mark the 10th anniversary of our organization, India Rights Network, and 5th anniversary of Center for Global India Insights. In our own humble way, we have organized seminars, published books, and issued briefs to shape the discourse on foreign policy and the rise of India as an important global player. We have partnered with leading think tanks and institutions such as India International Center, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Nehru Memorial and Museum Library, and VIF to organize conferences on themes related to India's foreign policy, as well as India's relations with major powers. We have published books for MEA and for other think tanks. Our latest book is India G20 Legacy, Shaping a New World Order, which has been edited by me. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, at this stage, let me briefly outline the key focus areas of today's discussion and what we hope to achieve in the next 90 minutes. As you all know, we are meeting 5 days before the big event, the formal inauguration of Donald J. Trump as the 47th President of the United States of America. The whole world is watching avidly as to how the policies and postures of the leader of the world's most powerful country and most powerful economy will impact different regions and countries. The concerns about the second Trump presidency, Trump 2.0, emanate from his famed unpredictability and his trademark way of functioning. Given Trump's focus on making America great again agenda, many analysts fear that the US will retreat from its global leadership role, leading to isolationism. The US allies, on the other hand, are apprehensive that Trump will extract a hard bargain for the security umbrella Washington provides them. While in some regions, such as Europe and the Middle East and Latin America, the Trump anxiety is more pronounced, in India, the US president elect continues to enjoy a high degree of approval. We are working on an internal policy brief that argues objectively with empirical facts that Trump 2.0 will not only sustain the momentum in India US relations, but will also raise the bar as this crucial partnership is underpinned by a robust bipartisan consensus. Another reason that gives optimism to the strategic community in India is Trump's declared policy of China containment, which some feel may work to the advantage of India. But it's not going to be smooth sailing. But looking ahead, it's not going to be smooth sailing for India. There is likely to be potential disruptions in areas of trade, tariffs, and H-1B visa. The friction generated by these two contentious issues will require nimble diplomacy by both sides and deft handling by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump. In this context, the personal chemistry, the famed personal chemistry between PM Modi and President Trump will play a pivotal role in ensuring that these issues do not spiral out of control. Geopolitically, the context of Trump 2.0 presidency and today's discussion is marked by two C's: conflicts and crisis. As we speak, the two wars are raging in Gaza and Ukraine, inflicting huge loss of lives and property. Donald Trump has promised to end the two wars as the two top priorities in the first few days of his presidency. If the Ukraine war ends, this could pave the way for a US-Russia rapprochement, opening new avenues for India. The big question is also whether Trump will strike a deal with China or will he continue aggressive policy against Beijing. There are more questions than answers. Right now, uncertainty, as they say, is the only certainty. Now, let me outline some house rules for the discussion. This webinar is being live streamed on our YouTube and Facebook channels. Attendees can ask questions and type it either on Facebook or YouTube, or they can send a mail to editor@indiarights.org. Please tweet about the conference and tag us at the rate of CGII Think Tank. The remarks made by speakers and ensuing discussion will be edited and published in the next edition of India and the World Journal. The recommendations emanating from the conference will be shared with key stakeholders invested in this crucial partnership, including the Government of India and other think tanks and industry bodies. With these words, may I invite first Dr. Mukesh Aghi, who is joining from Washington on a cold Washington morning. Dr. Mukesh Aghi is the President and Chief Executive of the US-India Strategic Partnership Forum. In his current role, he works extensively with business and government leaders in the US and India to promote trade and strengthen ties between the two countries. He has over 20 years of success in powering business expansion globally, boosting revenue, and increasing margins for companies in a variety of sectors. He was recognized by Square magazine as a global leader and has won many awards over the course of his professional career. If I go on reading out his bio, it will take a few minutes, so I'll stop here. And with these words, I would like to invite Dr. Aghi to speak on the future trajectory of India-US economic partnership. And the most important issue right now, which is exercising the minds of people here, the two issues. One is, of course, the trade issue. That is, will Trump club India with the rest of other countries and impose additional tariffs? What would that mean? Has India got a strategy in place? And when we look ahead, for long we have spoken about $500 billion trade target, which continues to remain elusive, although the trade is on an upswing. And maybe you also like to address the big issue, which is being talked about hysterically, about the H-1B visa. If Trump lives up to his word, it would be a huge, it could possibly be a huge embarrassment for India, the Indian government, as he decides to back off illegal immigrants, including Indians. So over to you, Mr. Aghi, to speak. You have 10 minutes or so.
Well, thank you very much, Manish, and good morning to and good evening to everybody. We have a administration coming in which is focus on how to make America great again. And in fact, yesterday there was an announcement from the incoming administration. Instead of having internal revenue services, they also announced external revenue services. That means how do you collect money from other countries as you basically do business with the United States? Now, what we have is a scenario where you will see a lot of glass being broken, norms being challenged, and a sense of unpredictability in an environment which is already very, very turbulent. So we do expect certain challenges as we go into the new administration. Now, with in regards to India and the US, you have two countries where the trade is crossed around $200 billion. India has a surplus of around $45 billion itself. But more important is that two countries geopolitically they are very much aligned in every aspect, vis-a-vis especially in Indo-Pacific and specifically towards China. And what more important is you also have a roughly 5 million Indian Americans, which make around 1.5% of the population, but they're generating roughly around 6% of the GDP. So you do have a large number of professional Indians whose per capita income is twice the average itself. Then you also have roughly 1.1 million green H-1B visa holder which have applied for green card, and that will take decades for them to get the green card to be a residence here permanently itself. So we have what I call is and something very interesting is there was a report published yesterday talking about how nations have looked at Trump administration and especially Trump as a leader and his approval rating. India was one country which he got the highest approval rating. It was in the high 70s itself, more than the US also. So what we are seeing is a interlink between the actual trade taking, interlink between the migration mobility itself, and also the opinion. But you also have to understand Indians are the third largest illegal migrant into the US. And roughly 150,000 have gone through the legal process, just like another 900,000 of the other countries' illegal migrant, which are going to get deported. And I think that's where you will see a challenges coming in because the two top countries, Mexico and El Salvador, are kind of at the moment reluctant to take back, whereas India has proactively taken the approach. Yes, we will take back our citizen. Let's make sure that we have a proven process to ensure they are from India and no issue taking them back. So I think that process has already begun. But more important is let's talk about from a geopolitical perspective. Yes, there is a thaw in discussion between India and China. There is a thaw as far as the investment goes, which needs to come into India from China. India's trade deficit with China is the highest itself, and India needs to get Chinese investment to come in, if nothing else, produce capital goods for further manufacturing itself. And what we have seen in the case of Apple, that's a prime example. If you are focused, define your policies towards a sector and a company, you can drive a incremental growth itself. Today, Apple is exporting roughly 25% of iPhone 16 from India. It has basically planned to, in partnership with Flex and is a contract manufacturer, roughly 200,000 employees. And what more important is it is gaining share of the domestic market. It has its revenue on India has crossed $5 billion. So while India can be challenging from a China plus one strategy, but what we are seeing is the opportunity for these companies to come in and not only set up manufacturing in India, but gain also the domestic market share. So coming back to the Trump administration, I think it is important to understand that what India has to do is work closely. And what we have seen is, yes, you have policy, but you look at the appointments of Senator Mark Rubio or Congressman Mark Waltz or John Radcliffe for the CIA director, they all seem to be China hawks itself. So I think that's where India has to basically leverage the national security angle and drive the economic agenda. And that's where we have recommended to the new administration to take the Quad partnership between the four countries, which is Japan, Australia, India, and the US, and somehow percolate that into an economic partnership and energy partnership. When you look at the four countries' GDP, it's roughly around $35 trillion. When you look at the FTA between US and Japan, it exists. FTA between US and Australia, it exists. India's partnership with Japan and some kind of trade agreement, it does exist. It's the same with Australia. So what's lacking is a trade agreement between India and the United States. And I think that's where I think India has to take a very proactive role and say, okay, number one, we are willing to work a comprehensive trade agreement. If you don't want to do a direct trade agreement, let's focus on doing a FTA between the four countries and create a common market, because you already have a security dialogue taking place and other partnership on the Indo-Pacific. And so you can drive also economic agenda in that arena also. So that's going to be very critical on part of India to be proactive on the FTA. Second would be it is important to basically for Trump administration to deal with the illegal immigration. And I think that's where India can proactively say, okay, we understand this is a process. We will identify the illegal Indian migrants and take them back. That kind of takes off a lot of pressure from Trump administration, while other countries may push back from that perspective. So we are very optimistic that the relationship between India and the US will continue in a positive trajectory. The trade will go. The investment from US companies, we are seeing momentum picking up substantially itself. But more important is the H-1B visa issue. It is going to get a little more explosive as you look at I call the MAGA rights and the tech Republicans who are going to put a big fight in this area itself. But I think more important, I believe, is that H-1B is critical for US companies. We have seen the data. For every 10 H-1B workers are rejected from granting the status, 9 jobs leave the country. For every 10% rejection, it has an impact of $85 billion on the US economy itself. But overall, we are very optimistic about this relationship. I believe there's room for improvement, but the intent and the direction is right. So on that note, I'd like to close here, Manish.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your views and that unmistakable note of optimism in your assessment, despite what skeptics say, the economic relationship is set for an upswing. Now I invite Ambassador Kanwal Sibal to speak. Ambassador Sibal is currently Chancellor, Jawaharlal Nehru University, Delhi. He served as Foreign Secretary to the Government of India from July 2022 to November 2002 to 2003. In his diplomatic career spanning more than 4 decades, he was India's ambassador to Turkey, to Russia, to France, and also served as Deputy Chief of Mission in the United States. He was a member of India's National Security Advisory Board, and he is one of our most prolific writers. And in a new avatar, he has turned out to be a Twitter warrior of sorts. So with these words, I invite Ambassador Sibal to address 2 questions. On the strategic side, Do you think the strategic content of the India-US partnership will deepen in days to come? It's a general sort of question where you can bring in some connected issues. And more specifically, is about the possibility, the realistic possibility of Trump, using his clout to end the Ukraine war. And will it lead to US-Russia rapprochement? And will it open new opportunities for India? Over to you, Ambassador Sibal.
Well, I think in your initial comments, you summarized the scenario very well, and Mukesh Aghi has given some very cogent remarks. And broadly, I agree with his optimism, general optimism. I think is well-founded. But as you said, the thing that is the most predictable about Trump is his unpredictability. So he has done certain things which are increasing that sense of uncertainty. For example, began by laying claim to Canada and now to Greenland and to the Panama Canal, totally unmindful of the kind of reaction that there would be in the wider world, because this upends the norms that the United States and the West has generally upheld as the core of their foreign policy and the values at the international level. This can have a ripple effect with some consequences for India and for the United States itself. Two, three things. One is that if United States, for security reasons and access to resources, can claim Canada and Greenland or the Panama Canal, then China can use that as an argument to justify its policy in the South China Sea and the East China Sea and with regard to Taiwan. They need not say this openly, but the underlying message is there that big powers can pursue their vision of their national self-interest by discarding what are accepted as norms of international diplomacy. Secondly, indirectly, this also can be used by the Russians to justify what they are doing in Ukraine, because at the core of it is the whole issue of national security. Not so much as a question of access to resources, because Russia has enormous resources as it is. But nevertheless, if you look at the dialogue on the American side, they have an eye on the resources of Ukraine, lithium and this and that. So in that sense, the resource argument also comes into play indirectly. And then when it comes to China and India, then the cartographic aggression that Trump has engaged in vis-a-vis Greenland and Canada will give some satisfaction to the Chinese that they've been doing it vis-a-vis India and they can do more of it. What I mean is that certain inhibitions, certain norms of international conduct, they are being now breached with a kind of diplomacy that is more reminiscent of 19th century power politics than the structures created after the Second World War. This may not have an immediate impact in terms of the ground situation, but these are the kind of seeds that are planted, which then can give arguments to others for their own expansionism. So that is one aspect. The other is with regard to China. There are certain facts on the ground. On the one hand, United States is doing as much as it can to deny China access to the most advanced technologies, including some restrictions they have announced yesterday or day before, which from the US point of view and from India's point of view, makes a lot of sense because China has advanced technologically enormously in select areas where they can dominate the global economic exchanges in those areas and make themselves indispensable and gives them enormous leverage. So if United States can slow down China's technological rise and advancement, it is helpful. It gives India some time to catch up, especially if we can also simultaneously build up our technology relationship with the United States. And in that context, I must say that the Biden administration and Jake Sullivan in particular have played a remarkable role in trying to build the foundation for cooperation in critical and advanced technologies through the ICET framework. And the fact that he chose to come to India a few days before leaving office and have a discussion on this subject and announce certain things which are very important in terms of removing some of the existing Indian entities from their export control lists so that cooperation in space as well as in the nuclear domain can be expanded. Though, of course, it does raise the question as to why they didn't do this, earlier on, so that the processes involved in getting all these restrictions removed could have been completed before they left office. But nevertheless, they have planted a seed which is bound to flower because this will be built upon by the incoming administration, because I can't see them stepping back from this, because there's no reason to do so forever. And one can give reasons, but that's a different debate. So on the other hand, he made some statements on China, which we may not take at face value, but it does show his trend of thinking. He's a bit lavish with his expressions, and he's called Xi an amazing person. And remarkably, he's the only foreign leader who Trump has identified by name as an invitee to his inauguration. He's not done that with anybody else. And then he went on to say that China and United States can together solve all the problems of the world. Now, this may be just a phrase that he threw, and we need not take it seriously. But if there is any thought behind this, then it's a bit of a support for the idea of a G2, that Russia has been weakened. There's no other power that has the stature of China. And therefore, if China and United States got together, they can work cooperatively. So there's a contradiction between all the China hawks that he has in his administration and certain other threats that he's made about imposing tariffs on China. And at the same time, a willingness to cooperate with China and have some kind of a stability in the relationship. So let's see where this goes. And this brings me to another thought, which is that India has to be careful to weigh very thoughtfully as to how much we want to go along with the United States in its anti-China strategy, and how much we want to keep a certain independence of action, because China is our direct neighbor. And the immediate and the pacing threat, if I can use the American phrase, from China is on the borders of India. And there we don't expect the United States at all to get involved in our territorial land disputes with China. So therefore, we have to keep this dialogue with China open, which we are maintaining. And if you saw the statement made by Army Chief yesterday or day before, clearly there is a sense that China is a threat. We are conscious of it. We will continue to meet that threat. But we are also looking ahead to continuing a dialogue with China so that we can stabilize our ties. This is a very, very important challenge that we face. With regard to H-1B visas, yes, for a certain category of Indians, and in terms of the politics of it for the government of India, this is a sensitive issue. But at the end of the day, there are two things. This H-1B visa serves how many Indians and what category of Indians? There's absolutely no relationship between these few numbers and the needs of the nation at large. And therefore, if avenues for them to go to United States under the H-1B scheme and then eventually become American citizens or whatever is not something that we need to tear our hair over. And there is also the aspect of brain drain. Of course, this is the question that you create an ecology in your own country where these people don't need to go to the United States, and that they actually serve the technological and other advancement of the country in situ, in India itself, rather than contributing to America's technological progress and primacy at the international level. But this is a important, sensitive political issue, because the people who are most committed to the United States in India are the ones who want to migrate there, who want to go there, who are looking at the H-1B visas, and if the numbers are reduced, then there'll be a bit of a backlash in public opinion that India is talking so much about its bipartisan relationship with the United States, with a bipartisan consensus, 70% approval rating that the Indian public opinion has of Trump, and then they're clamping down on you. People won't look at the fine print there. They will look at the headlines, and it doesn't sort of look good. As for illegal migration, I entirely agree with Mukesh that we should have an open mind, and we should bring them back without any fuss. It is very clear that if they have entered in United States illegally, then they must be sent back after due verification. And we should take this element out of any contentious agenda with the United States. And finally, with regard to the trade issue, I think Mukesh has outlined some very interesting ideas about how the Quad can deepen their economic cooperation because there are existing FTAs and this and that exist, that are there. And you can have a kind of a quadrilateral FTA, though I feel the Biden administration very tentatively moved in that direction through that IPEC or whatever it's called. But we kept out of the trade part of it. So there are certain issues there. So I don't know, given the general antipathy in the Trump administration and Trump himself against these kind of trade deals, it's a very good idea, but let's see if this can be implemented in any foreseeable future. And finally, make America great again. I think America is great. I mean, so it remains the preeminent power. Surely, if China has come up and is challenging the United States. But there is a lot of views, a lot of literature which says that, look, China will never be able to surpass the United States. China is slowing down, and they give you some very cogent arguments to justify this. So what does it mean, make America great again? Does this mean precisely what Trump is doing now? Lay claims to Canada, lay claims to Greenland, lay claims to Panama, and tomorrow do something else. That greatness should not be translated into a desire to be a preeminent, dominant power. Finally, I'm taking too long, but the Ukraine question you asked, but that's very important. That is very key to, it's a key to so many things, US, Europe, US, Global South, Russia, Global South, India, etc., etc. Now there, the initial sounds that are coming from the United States, signals that are coming from the United States, and Trump himself wants to resolve this issue, are positive. And there is some kind of a back channel conversation going on, because they've gone ahead and even talked about a potential meeting between Trump and Putin, which will require a lot of preparation. On the Russian side, they have said they're open to a conversation with Trump and to a meeting with Trump, though at the same time, if you hear Lavrov or Medvedev, they're very cautious in their assessments about the real possibility of a real breakthrough because of the underlying uh, total difference in positions on both sides. Two things in this regard. One is that for Russia, uh, two things are extremely important: retain the territory that they have got, and also make sure that there is a credible agreement on long-term agreement on Ukraine not joining NATO, and that should be supported by some kind of a mechanism which makes it impossible to violate that agreement. But on the other hand, if the United States were to cede these two on these 2 points to Russia, then Russia has won, and United States, it will be presented as some kind of a geopolitical strategic setback to to United States and to Trump, and how the Trump administration would want to play that, I can't say. But and Europe will be left in a lurch. They won't know what to do. They've totally committed themselves to the American position, and the the irony is that they have a Russian threat on the east, and now they have a U.S. threat on the west, and they don't know what to do, and that is why their reactions to uh, on Trump's claim to territory that belongs to a EU member state the reactions are very muted. Anyway, one can go on, and I wouldn't like to continue. I'll stop here.
Nuanced big picture view. Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Thank you, Ambassador Sibal, for that very nuanced big picture view and the finer points, and your point about not to make too much of H-1B visa. Now, that's something we need to discuss a lot, because obviously it's going to be a big ticket media optics issue, but yes, you're very right in striking that cautionary note. And now, basically, I want to thank Mr. Mukesh Aghi. On a special request, he has managed to join. He has a really, really important meeting with the powers that be. So, Mr. Aghi, thank you so much for sharing your insights. We'll share the video with you, and we'll continue this conversation. Thank you. Now I invite Mr. Shalabh Kumar. Let me introduce him briefly. Mr. Shalabh Kumar is a Chicago-based inventor, industrialist, and philanthropist. He is the chairman and CEO of AVG Group of Companies, which designs and manufactures electronic components and products. He is also conservative commentator and foreign policy expert on South Asia and China, as well as a grassroots community leader and political donor. Most importantly, he was the man behind that viral slogan, is Ab Ki Baar Trump Sarkar in 2020. And that event was addressed by Prime Minister Modi. He is the founder and chairman of the National Indian American Public Policy Institute, which took a congressional delegation to India in March 2013 to meet with then Gujarat Chief Minister Narendra Modi. This visit was very crucial in ending the isolation of Mr. Modi, and help establish his relationship with important players in the US political landscape. He is a national chairman of newly formed Hindu and Indian American Coalition of Republican National Community, which espouses the interest of Hindus and Indian Americans in US Congress. In 2015, he co-founded with Speaker Newt Gingrich the Republican Hindu Coalition. I can go on, and he is one of the important funders, of Donald Trump. So he has privileged access to the big man we are all talking about right now. So with these words, let me invite him to speak on two issues. I'd like Mr. Kumar to speak about how does he look at the US-China relations under the second presidency of Donald Trump, And what could it possibly mean for India? And what could be the possible friction points? Uh, I mean, if Trump really intensifies pressure on China, what options, as we say, what will be India choices? Will India play along? So over to you, Mr. Shalabh Kumar.
Inviting me to share my thoughts on this eminent forum. There's no question in anybody's mind that Trump's landslide victory in November 2024 has changed geopolitics forever. America spoke. 5 million Indian Americans spoke. 6 million Hindu Americans spoke. Hindu American vote was beyond my expectation. RSC's goal was to do better than 2016, where we achieved 65% for Trump versus 35% for Hillary, perhaps even reach 75%. But the results were simply amazing. Best example, and it's important to note this, I can give you, is the town of Edison, New Jersey. It's got a population of 200,000. Out of that, 100,000, half of it is Hindu Americans. What a change from 2016 to 2024. I used to have tons of debates in the Indian bazaars of Edison in 2016, where the arguments against Trump were intense. Move to 2024. It's hard to find any Hindu American who would vote for Kamala. They run away from Kamala. What a change. It begs the question, why such a dramatic shift? Progressive left had gone too far. 200,000 illegals crossing the US-Mexican border every month. Inflation, everyday grocery prices doubled. Humiliation everywhere in the world, starting with the incredible defeat in Afghanistan. In just 4 short years, the United States went from being the most powerful nation to a laughingstock on the world stage. So here is what the world should expect during the first month, January and February of 2025. Immediate arrest and return of all entering US illegally. Immediate withdrawal from JCPOA with Iran. Military action against Hamas if hostages are not released by the time of the inauguration. Keystone Pipeline restarted. Like he says, drill, baby, drill. There will be a significant drop in oil prices. Consumer prices will show instant decline. China will see imposition of about 40%. That's the economic forecasters' best estimate. 40% new tariffs on whatever is already there. Its PNTR status will be revoked. Mexico will pay 25% tariffs unless its president Sheinbaum completely folds and begs Trump for relief. Now, when it comes to India, India also might see a 10% tariff increase. NATO countries will start to commit to pay their share of EU defense budget, or they will see tariffs imposed on them. Mukesh had pointed out this new agency is not a real agency, but we talked about is IRS versus ERS, External Revenue Service. So Trump is very serious about this. Starting 2025, US economy will grow at 4 to 5% annually. Our country will very soon become energy independent. However, the most fundamental change that we have, it will have a dramatic impact all over the world, will be Elon Musk's plan as head of DOGE to shave off $200 billion a year spent by US bureaucrats. This will result in need for less borrowing by the federal government, resulting in lower interest rates. Treasury yields will go down. Stock market will boom. Lower taxes resulting from the reduced spending will further fuel economic output, resulting in an additional 1 to 2% GDP growth. More Americans will have secure jobs, increasing federal tax revenue. Government will also be able to provide bigger tax incentives to have American companies bring jobs back to the United States. Best way to think about DOGE is to think of a small town with an employer that is sick and unable to pay its bills. If all of a sudden that employer is able to cut its operating costs and spend more in R&D and marketing, well, that's what my business is, its business will skyrocket. This is what to happen in America. Its impact, this DOGE impact, will be worldwide. European and Asian economies, including India, will want to follow suit. New political movements across the world would want to emulate MEGA. It's already starting. The MEGA movement across the world will be the start of decades of peace and prosperity. Incomes and assets will grow for all Americans and all those nations that follow suit. On the other hand, terrorists and terror-sponsoring nations like Pakistan and Iran will be on the run, and eventually their people may just throw out their governments run by their mullahs, dictators, and sponsors of radical Islam. I want to spend the next few minutes talking specifically about the US, China, and India. Diplomacy aside, there is no question that China is an existential threat for both US and India. In my soon to be released book, I'll just show this if you can, people can see that. It's titled Chinese Colonization of America 2049 and the Only Man Who Can Stop It. I point out that China's long-term aspirations are very clear, and it's not shy about its ambition to what they call rejuvenate China, to revise the international order. China's navy is already bigger than ours, and by 2049, so too will its GDP unless course changes. Currently, it's at 18.27 trillion. It's projected to grow conservatively to 58 trillion by 2049, while US GDP is expected to be 32 trillion unless there is a total realignment in manufacturing. So Chinese economy will be twice as big as America, and its military will be twice as strong. This is simple math. That's why the title of my book. India, on the other hand, is expected to grow faster, but its economy will still be much smaller than China's, and it will continue to endure China's expansionist warlike threats, even though they are clocked in diplomatic words. We, China, will resolutely safeguard our, and by what that means, our Taiwan, Himalayas, whole South Asia. We will safeguard our sovereignty, security, and development interests. That's the language they speak. Imagine the port of Karachi being owned by China, just as the ports in Sri Lanka are under China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Pakistan is well on its way to becoming the next Sri Lanka. India has not done much better when it comes to manufacturing, especially electronic products. Where it has become a powerhouse in software, it also imports a very significant amount of its goods from China. This has to be deeply understood. Without bringing back manufacturing from China to US and shifting the rest of it, which cannot be brought to US, to allied countries like India, the Chinese dragon cannot be tamed. It's as simple as that. Working together, however, is not only feasible, but necessary. My book also outlines the creation of an electronic city free from bureaucratic interference in India to accomplish this mission. The manufacturing shift can happen only with the right people in the new Trump administration working closely with their counterparts in India. Individuals on both sides must have not only business expertise, not just some lawyers, but need to have solid manufacturing acumen as well, as it will require China-like long-term planning and investments from both sides. These policy goals cannot be accomplished without American policymakers acknowledging and addressing a very important element I want to point out, a significant trust deficit between the leadership of US and India. It is, however, surmountable. Russia has been a steadfast ally of India. US policymakers, all the new ones coming in, they have to understand that. Ever since the Chinese invaded India in 1962, President Kennedy refused to provide air cover for tens of thousands of Indian soldiers trapped on Himalayan hills. In 1971 was a lot worse. President Nixon sided with Pakistan when Pakistan invaded India. Once again, Russia came to the rescue. And most recently, it's very important to note that, at a time when 65% of India's weapon systems originate from Russia, US is 2 years behind in shipping the critical GE aircraft engines for India's Tejas program. We have to convince India's leadership that we, US, will be a reliable long-term supplier of advanced weapon systems and technology. On the other hand, India imposes significant tariffs on select US-made products, which is always a source of friction and trust deficit on the part of American leadership. Once again, with the right people in the new Trump administration, it is surmountable. America and India have a clear interest in countering China's plan to change the international order by 2049. Their economic and national security interests demand so. So too do their shared commitments to freedom, individual, collective prosperity. For this meaningful US-India partnership to coalesce most effectively, the trust deficit needs to be clearly understood and minimized. The new Trump administration must hit the proverbial ground running, clear-eyed, motivated, prepared, with proper and focused management. US and India could have, that's my target, to have a free trade bilateral agreement by the end of 2027. It's my goal. President Trump has already declared, once again in Hindi, Bharat and America sabse achhe dost. So God bless America and God bless India. Thank you. Turn it over back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Kumar, for that very spirited address, full of insights and a very privileged glimpse into, sense what we can expect from the Trump presidency in days to come, and some of your very innovative suggestions, electronic city and the rest and all that. There are already some questions for you. So we will come to all that at the question and answer session. And now I would like to play the video message from Mr. Vivek Lall. Vivek Lall is Chief Executive of General Atomics Global Corporation. Dr. Lall worked at Lockheed Martin and an important position with Boeing as well. In response to my question about the future trajectory of India-US defense partnership and the issues and whether the defense relationship will sustain its momentum, will it further scaled up, this is what he has to say. Play the video, please.
Good evening, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure. the US-India defense corridor and some of the implications with the transition from the Biden administration to the Trump administration. I think over the years there has been a lot of progress in the US-India defense corridor, especially in terms of the various agreements that have been signed government to government and the defense trade that has continued to increase. I think that trajectory has transcended different administrations, whether Democratic or Republican, and I fully expect that will continue to move in that direction because India and the US are strategic partners and the relationship is multifaceted at this point. As you know, one of the significant developments in recent years has been the launch of the ISET program, and many critical and emerging technologies are of interest to both countries, whether it's artificial intelligence, semiconductors, quantum, and so forth. I do think that as the new administration comes into DC, there will be further impetus to the relationship, and it'll grow in strength, not only in terms of defense trade, but also in terms of some of these core critical and emerging technologies. One of the key pillars, even in the first Trump administration, was finding ways of incorporating the best of India to the US and the best of US to India in terms of not only the regulatory aspects as well as the transfer of technology aspects, but also in terms of the people-to-people ties. You have global talent that are working on immensely difficult problems to stay ahead of adversaries. And in that regard, one of the important aspects for deterrence is persistent surveillance. I think one of the major aspects of persistent surveillance would be whether it is space, air, land, undersea. They all are important. But I think the most economical and the most pervasive across the domains will be that by air. And as you can see, the geopolitics that we are engulfed with today requires real-time ISR capability. I do think like-minded countries like the US and India need to come together to have a common operating picture, a real-time common operating picture. And that is, hopefully in the months and years ahead, we will see a lot more integration in terms of systems to provide that common operating picture to like-minded allies. I do feel also that in terms of technology development, whether it's quantum sensing or it is critical minerals, there is an investment in not only in terms of R&D that's required on both sides, but also in terms of the people, training and workforce development. I think some of the things that have been put in place have to be amplified multiple fold, and we need to get the universities and academia involved on both sides. And I fully expect that in the Trump administration, all aspects will be looked at, but they will be given further impetus to move forward in all these domains. I would like to conclude by saying that in one of the pillars that is often neglected is the role of the industry captains. And I think the industry on both sides have gone to the next level where it's not just the large companies on both sides that are engaging, but also the medium and the small industries. And I think in the next few years, you will see a lot more partnerships at those levels, because that is the critical supply chain that both countries need to keep working on. And I also feel that the startup companies will have a large role to play, and you will start to see some of these companies become unicorns in the defense space. We are very proud of what we have done in the startup space with some of our partnerships, and I think that is something we will remain focused on. And I think the new administration will also encourage defense innovation, and other aspects that I spoke about. Thank you.
Thank you. This was there are many questions for him, but unfortunately he is not here to address them. Now we move on to Dr. Harinder Sekhon. Dr. Harinder Sekhon has over 3 decades of research, writing, and teaching experience on various aspects of India's relations. She's a distinguished fellow Cuts International, a public policy think tank, where she looks at the Indo-Pacific and US-India defense relations. Until recently, she was a senior fellow at Vivekananda International Foundation. She has written many books on India-US relations. Uh, Harinder, in your remarks, you may like to address, you have around 10 minutes maximum. How do you look at the future of Quad under the second Trump presidency? What new features we can expect? What facets of the Quad will be highlighted or accentuated under the incoming administration? And what parts may be revised? Over to you. Volume. Anil? Anil? Wait. What's happening? Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Good evening, and thank you so much, Manish, for inviting me to this very distinguished panel. And I hope I can justify the faith you've reposed on me. And it's very good to see my other co-panelists. And also, I did touch base with Ambassador Sibal, but nice to see Michael. We only seem to be meeting virtually these days. Now, coming to the Quad and the Indo-Pacific, I think the very fact that you have a Quad foreign ministers meeting the day after Trump's inauguration, I think it's slated for the 21st of January, shows that the Indo-Pacific and the Quad is on the mind of the new administration and will continue to get the same kind of traction as it got during Trump 1.0. And why I say that is because if you go back to the first administration of Donald Trump, there were a few critical developments which took place during that period. Firstly was the renaming of the Asia Pacific to Indo-Pacific, and also to rename the US PACOM, the Pacific Command, into the US Indo-Pacific Command. Now, this was not just nomenclature. He also followed it up with, in 2017, they came up with the foreign ministers. I mean, the first foreign ministers Quad dialogue took place in 2017 during the Trump administration. So when people thought that the Quad was not gaining enough traction, and I think even India was not really, there was a feeling that India is not fully committed to the Quad because of the China angle, and everybody was hedging about China. It was the first Trump administration which convened the first high level dialogue, and from there's been no looking back. This was followed by the US in 2018. They came up with the National Defense Strategy Dialogue, which actually talked a lot about, it stepped up the level of defense exercises and the defense engagement, and also encouraged this engagement amongst the Indo-Pacific, the regional powers. And in 2019, I think the most defining document which Trump 1 came out was, it was a vision document which talked about the free and open Indo-Pacific. And this, in a nutshell, actually laid down, it was a comprehensive document, which laid down, talking about shared vision, and a free and open Indo-Pacific. It actually talked about, shift in the administration's priorities towards the Indo-Pacific. He was very vocal in recognizing China as the number one challenger to the US power, and felt that this region needed more traction. And he talked about that, and I quote, that we will be friends, partners, and allies for a long time to come. So so I think we could see like a continuation of this policy. And he also talked about stepping up relations with partners like India. It said that he places a lot of importance on South Asian partners and also recognizes their political autonomy and their role in the inclusive Indo-Pacific vision and architecture. So he talked about, so we saw a lot of US outreach in the strategic domain, and this was outlined in this 2019 vision document which the Trump administration came out. But you see, the other thing was Trump's campaign was built also at that time. There was a note of caution, and he said that the regional powers, local powers, need to assume responsibility and take on the, share some of the expenditure with the United States. So something like what he says with the NATO powers, that you need to step up your spending for your own security. Here also the US came up with this overarching vision where they encouraged the regional powers to strengthen their own bilateral and trilateral partnerships so that the US could concentrate elsewhere. And even now, I think it's going to be more of a focus on the greater European architecture, because he's focused on Europe, and he's talking about Greenland, he's talking about Canada. I think the focus is the Arctic region, and is going to be a primary focus, and it's all about bringing the Ukraine war to an end, which actually frees up this space, the Indo-Pacific and the Quad. The US would assume and continue with its overarching policy over here. But as we saw during Trump 1.0, that there were three other partnerships, key partnerships, which were encouraged by the United States. The first was the trilateral security cooperation between the US, Japan, and South Korea. Then there was AUKUS between Australia, UK, and the United States, which was a very defining partnership because it opened the way for Australia to assume greater responsibility amongst the Quad countries in the Indo-Pacific by opening up, the way for them to get nuclear submarines. And then there was the other third minilateral called the Squad, comprising South Korea, Japan, the Philippines, and the United States. So I think this vision of Trump will continue, because overall we've noticed that there has been a continuity in US policy across governments, whichever administration is in place. And I think the minilateral policy is going to continue. They'll try to energize and get the smaller Pacific countries also to come in, like Fiji and the other smaller islands, where India could play a major role, because we noticed during COVID that India's vaccine diplomacy made a great impact in this region. And this is something which India could do, which would be challenging, for the United States. So, there is a way for India to step up its own engagement in East Asia and also in the Indo-Pacific region, and to do things with the smaller countries like Indonesia, Fiji, and the other countries. So I think we've had, and in between his two administrations, there are challenges to the US economy. COVID has been the biggest challenge to the US economy. So I think Trump's interest in towards the Indo-Pacific will remain unhindered. China continues to be recognized as the chief challenge. And also, what policy evolves between the US and Russia is going to be important, because Russia has also been looking at playing a larger role in this area. And Putin and Shinzo Abe had a great relationship, because Japan became very active and has been pursued very active engagements in the Indo-Pacific. Now, will we see something developing once again between Japan and Russia? Russia playing a larger role in the Indo-Pacific remains to be seen. But I think the future for the Quad is still pretty good. And I am pretty optimistic that India, we'll see strengthening of these military exercises between the Quad partners. A lot of them, the frequency has increased, and I think there's a lot of maritime engagement between India, Australia, India and Japan, then the Sabarmala and all these maritime exercises. The frequency has definitely gone up, and also I think the foundational agreements, because that is the other thing. What the first Trump administration, they concluded all the foundational agreements which had been lying in limbo for a number of years, and I think that paved the way for India to step up and extend basing facilities, or I shouldn't say basing, sorry, refueling facilities to the Quad partners when the ships come docking over here, and for repairs. So I think going forward, the Indo-Pacific policy and relations between the Quad partners are going to see an uptick and a greater role for regional stakeholders. And India has also shed its hesitancy about the China factor, because we are dealing with China independently on the border issue. And we've also got our own economic relations, though I think our trade deficit has further gone up with China. But I think on the whole, the Americans are, I think India is going to be able to straddle both its role in the Indo-Pacific and its bilateral relationship with China simultaneously. Also, the only other thing I think came up, and I think Ambassador Sibal talked about, is a clash between MAGA, that's Make America Great Again, and Come Make in India, which is the government of India's plan. So I think this is where we need to work bilaterally with the United States. We need to focus more on this. And, so I think I'll end over here. So on the whole, I feel that the Quad has a bright future. And let's see if Trump drops in when the Quad foreign ministers are meeting in Washington. It depends. I think the optics are going to be very high when it comes to the Indo-Pacific and Quad. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Harinder, for the very optimistic picture. And you're right. The very fact that Quad foreign minister meeting is taking place a day after the inauguration just shows the importance the Trump presidency would attach to the Trump administration. Also, it was during Trump's first presidency, the Quad, which are lying dormant all that while, was revived. And we'll probably see a modified version of Quad, but more on that later when we come to the question answer. Now it's my pleasure to invite Mr. Michael Kugelman. Michael, thanks so much for waiting all this while. The youngest speaker on this panel, probably. Are you there?
Yes, yeah. I'm here. Thanks.
So let me introduce Michael. He's director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. He's a leading specialist on Afghanistan, India, and Pakistan, and their relations with the United States. He's the editor or co-editor of at least 11 books. He's written for marquee publications, New York Times, Foreign Policy, Foreign Affairs. He has edited volumes on Pakistan's energy crisis, urbanization, and India's contemporary security challenges. So, Michael, my question to you is essentially, in during Trump's first term, we saw him talking tough on terrorism emanating from Pakistan, which is an important concern for India. And of course, now in the aftermath of the withdrawal of American troops, it's been now 4 years, right? How do you look at Trump 2.0 policies in South Asia? What impact will it have on South Asia, and what could be possible ramifications for India? Over to you. You have 10 to 12 minutes so that we can have some discussion.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Manisha. Great to be here, and I appreciate the compliment. I often feel old, so I'm glad that I look young. But I will respond to your question with 3 points, 3 brief interventions. The first one is that the incoming president will likely retain the Indo-Pacific strategy as the core policy guiding U.S. policy in Asia, including South Asia. And of course, as we all know, this was Trump's policy to start with. He came out with the Indo-Pacific strategy during his first term. It might be adjusted a bit, it might be rebranded a bit, but I suspect that we will see continuity with the Biden administration on this policy. And I think that this would bode well for India. The U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy is, I would argue, aligned with India's own strategic interests in South Asia, particularly when it comes to the idea of working with partners to counter China and its growing presence and influence in the region. I suspect that the Trump administration will likely pick up where the Biden administration left off in terms of how the Indo-Pacific strategy is deployed. I think that one big focus will be on trying to offer investment options, particularly infrastructure investment options that are transparent and equitable and more attractive to countries than what they've gotten from China. The focus will be on trying to give countries better alternatives to what China is doing. I would argue that the U.S. Has not been terribly successful with this plan, but I think that we have seen some modest progress over the last few years, and I think that this general plan of action will continue with the second Trump administration. I think that a big tool of the Indo-Pacific strategy will continue to be the DFC, the U.S., the International Development Finance Corporation. It has to be reauthorized in Congress. I suspect it will be, but assuming DFC is reauthorized, I'm quite confident that the Trump administration will retain it. And again, the DFC is something that sponsors infrastructure investments across the Indo-Pacific. Now, the Trump administration might change the focus of it a bit. There has been a very heavy focus in terms of DFC investments in South Asia on clean energy infrastructure, climate change mitigation technologies. That might change a bit, but I'm quite confident that the DFC will continue to be wielded as a very critical tool by the administration to pursue its Indo-Pacific strategy. My second point, in response to your question about what we could expect for Trump's policy and South Asian implications for India, is that Trump's country-specific approaches in South Asia, not India here, but other countries in the region, should on the most part have positive implications for India's interests and for India on the whole. Start with Pakistan. A few of us have already mentioned Pakistan briefly. It's hard to imagine much engagement with Pakistan from the Trump administration. I would argue that the Biden administration didn't really have much engagement with Pakistan. It, of course, did not change the move during the first Trump administration to suspend most security aid to Pakistan. And as we all know, you had several rounds of sanctions slapped on Pakistan for its ballistic missiles program, just during the last few weeks. And I think that we're going to see continuity here with the Trump administration. I don't think that this Trump administration will have much interest in the newer areas of focus that emerged on modest levels in the Biden years. The Green Alliance framework, for example, was a big part of the U.S. Relationship with Pakistan. It's something that the U.S. Embassy in Islamabad pushed a lot. Clean energy cooperation, I don't really see those being retained as priorities for either U.S. relations with Pakistan or U.S. relations with countries on the whole. I would also argue that many have spoken about how many of the people that Trump has picked to be a part of his administration constitute some of the strongest proponents of partnership with India in all of Washington. And I would argue that these same people happen to be, in many cases, some of the harshest critics of Pakistan in Washington. You think about someone like Mike Waltz or Marco Rubio and so on. There is one possible wild card with Pakistan here. If Pakistan is able to successfully exploit Trump's concerns about the Islamic State terror group and Islamic State Khorasan and its presence in Afghanistan, and tries to offer certain things to the U.S., like offers to share intelligence about ISK movements in Afghanistan. Trump and his administration, I think, will worry a lot about the ISK threat. I mean, this is something that's been a big concern for the Biden administration, especially as ISK has demonstrated the ability to project a threat well beyond Afghanistan. And there even have been a few ISK plots foiled in Europe and even in the United States. So this will be a concern for the Trump administration, and ISK does have its main bases in Afghanistan. I'll get into Afghanistan in a moment. But I would not overstate this possibility of the idea of new counterterrorism cooperation with Pakistan. It's just hard to imagine the incoming president or anyone in his administration being willing to give up something in return to the Pakistanis, in return for Pakistani offers of intelligence sharing, counterterrorism assistance, or whatever the case may be. I just don't think there's going to be a lot of trust at all for Pakistan from this administration. We know the story of U.S.-Pakistan relations, and we know how the relationship has changed, I would argue devolved, since the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan. Let's go to Bangladesh briefly. The Biden administration has reconfigured the relationship with Bangladesh during its last year in office in ways that I don't think the incoming president will support. Since the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, the U.S. government focus has been on professing support for Bangladesh's efforts to stabilize the country, bring back democracy. The U.S. has pledged support with development aid, technical assistance for reforms, and so on. And I think that for the incoming president, this might sound a bit like nation building, and I don't think that he would be inclined to support that type of plan of action. I don't think that he would be terribly inclined to embrace Dr. Yunus because of his politics. The two men, of course, Trump and Yunus, have very different politics. In the past, Dr. Yunus has criticized Trump quite harshly. I'm not sure if the incoming president will remember that, but that could be an issue as well. I think that Trump and his administration will view the relationship with Bangladesh through commercial and strategic lenses. His administration will want to pursue trade, which grew during the first Trump administration, U.S.-Bangladesh trade. But Bangladesh's worsened economic state over the last few years may cut into that hope of maintaining healthy trade relations with Bangladesh. And also, I think that the administration will want to push Bangladesh to try to rely less on China, part of the broader Indo-Pacific strategy. Whether successful or not, these likely U.S. goals vis-a-vis Bangladesh, I don't think appear to have a lot of risk of upsetting India. I just don't think you're going to see as close of a relationship between Yunus's Bangladesh, or however long he stays in leading the government, and Trump compared to Yunus's Bangladesh and Biden. Let's go to Afghanistan very briefly. The administration is not going to want to rock the boat. Some of the likely top officials in the administration, including Mike Waltz, who we know he'll be there from day one, these are sharp critics of the Taliban. They won't want to engage with the Taliban, but on the whole, the administration, like the Biden administration, will accept the Taliban, even if it does not extend formal recognition, and I doubt it will. It will also likely view the Taliban's efforts to counter ISK as a good thing, something that indirectly benefits U.S. interests. If we assume that the Trump administration will take a don't rock the boat type policy with Afghanistan, I think that should be helpful for India, as New Delhi very cautiously looks to expand its outreach with the Taliban, as it's been doing in recent weeks. My third point, and I'll be brief and conclude, I think that the most deleterious potential implications for India coming out of Trump's South Asia policy will likely be some of his policies regarding India. I think that, we've heard this already. Trump will be good for U.S.-India partnership, generally speaking. He'll help advance it. But there will be some minefields to navigate, and the risk of tariffs, pressure on India to buy less Russian oil, the possibility of Trump backing airstrikes on Iran, the two ongoing investigations, the murder for hire plot, the Adani indictment. Trump, I think, will want those investigations to continue to be pursued. The possibility that Trump might try to reach an understanding with China. None of these challenges would cause grievous harm to U.S.-India relations. It's a deep and multifaceted relationship that's, I think, foolproof from these shocks, or these potential shocks. But what I'm saying, and I conclude here, is that the challenges that we could see in U.S.-India relations in Trump 2.0, I think that would be more serious than any challenges that could potentially arise for India stemming from Trump's policies in India's neighborhood more broadly. So with that, I'll conclude, and back to you, Manish.
Thank you, Michael, for very succinct and very pointed analysis. There are different countries in South Asia, especially when we talk about India, Bangladesh, that will be worth exploring in detail, but we are constrained by time. So we'll come back to you again if there are questions. Now I will open this. There are some questions from the audience. And at this point, I'd like to invite gentleman called Lavish Sharma, who works as a consultant with MEA, to pose his question to the. Please identify who is the question addressed to. Yeah, go
Thank
ahead,
you, sir.
Lavish.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity, and it's an amazing gathering. I will not take much time, but uh, so basically, as Dr. Kugelman said, that Trump is going to be great for Indo-US relations. But in the Biden administration, we saw abrupt pullout of troops from Afghanistan. Then we saw regime change in Bangladesh, and we are not even talking about Myanmar. Uh, Owing to all these, and the world is already, I mean, it's complex. Middle East and Russia, Ukraine. What can we expect from Trump? I mean, I'm sure he wants to change the dynamics of relations, global conflicts, but South Asia specifically to India and India's neighborhood. What can we expect under Trump administration? That's my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Michael, you want to respond to it in 2 minutes? I know it is a complex question. There are so many aspects to it. Yeah.
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, I guess just to underscore what I said just before, I think that on the whole, the contours of the Trump administration's policy in South Asia will be very similar to the Biden administration's, and that's going to be this continued focus on the Indo-Pacific strategy, which at the end of the day is meant to counter China, even if that's not often publicly acknowledged as the main objective of the strategy. That's what it'll be. And as I said earlier, I think that some of the country-specific approaches that Trump takes will be similar to Biden's. Others will be a bit different. And I think Bangladesh is what stands out the most, where we could see some differences. I just don't think that you're going to see so much full-fledged support, open-ended support from the Trump administration to helping Bangladesh with its rebuilding, bringing back democracy, so on and so forth. Those types of plans. Myanmar is a very important issue. I'm glad that you brought that up. I don't think anyone else brought that up, and I understand how significant an issue that is for India, particularly when combined with the volatilities of Bangladesh. And I think the Trump administration is, I don't want to call it it's not going to be an isolationist administration, but, I don't think it's necessarily going to want to go out of its way to try to get involved in internal affairs in other countries. I think that it certainly would be aware of and concerned about the issue of the Rohingya and the broader volatilities playing out between the intensifying conflict in Myanmar and the spillover effects that could have in India and in Bangladesh. I think if it's seen from a stability lens, particularly in the context of possible radicalization threats and the potential to deepen instabilities or even increase the risks of terrorism in that part of the region, that would certainly get the attention of the Trump administration. But I don't think you're going to see a terribly hands-on approach from the administration on specific issues like the conflict in Myanmar, but certainly will want to try to extend support to India in any ways possible to help to work with India as it looks to manage those regional challenges.
What the fuck? Hello, are you there?
Me?
Okay. Thank you. There's a question for Ambassador Sibal very briefly. This is from Russian journalist Elena. It's saying that taking into account India's growing role in the international arena and Modi's ability to reach out to world leaders, can India become a place for the first meeting between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump? Over to you, Ambassador Sibal.
I don't think so.
Hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think if this meeting is going to take place, maybe the most likely candidate would be Hungary, Orban's Hungary, because he's right next door. He's also Hungary is a member of the European Union also, and represents a certain strand of thinking within the EU, which is not in concordance with Brussels thinking, or for that matter, even of France or Germany. And Orban He will be there at the inauguration. He has some kind of a special bond with Trump. He had gone and met Trump at Mar-a-Lago. And he's been to Russia. And he's been trying to actually find some kind of a um, solution to the problem, if not a solution, at least the start of a dialogue to work towards an eventual solution to the conflict. So I think he would stand out as a candidate. But India, no. India, why should India get into this and just invite trouble for ourselves?
All right. Okay, Ambassador Sibal, thank you so much. Ambassador Sibal has an important meeting. He has to leave. Thank you so much for finding time to join in and for your comments and analysis. There's a question. Ambassador Sibal, you may leave. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. The next question is for Mr. Shalabh Kumar from Sapna Dwivedi, Jawaharlal Nehru University. She asked about, you have championed the interest of Hindus and Indian Americans, and Indian American play such a pivotal role in America's public life, and they're so successful. Where is this Khalistan movement coming from? She's basically asking that the Khalistan issue became a very contentious issue during the last days of the Biden administration. Do you think Trump will handle it differently? Number one. And number two, there's another question for you from Mr. Suryanath. He talks about India's diaspora as very successful. And he says that, can we go a step further? What more can diaspora do? Over to you, Mr. Kumar. Anil? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so when it comes to Canada and Khalistan, so you can see what has already happened with Trump's arrival, that Trudeau is gone. And so Khalistan movement will be adversely affected in a way, you could say, over there. And Modi administration can expect a lot of support from Trump on that particular issue. And so it's a small issue, small group of people in Canada. And when President Trump made the remark about Canada being 51st state, he's kind of course, joking in that respect, but sends a message. So that issue is a small issue, and it'll go away. Now, with respect to what Hindu and Indian American diaspora can do, first of all, I'd like to make a point, even though it has not been raised in this particular discussion, but I'd like to raise a point that not every Hindu American is Indian, and not every Indian is Hindu American. So there is actually 5 million Indian Americans in the country, but there are 6 million Hindu Americans that come from different countries. So, that's the difference. But what Indian diaspora can do is already done a lot. The influence of Indian diaspora on U.S.-India relations is already been phenomenal. I mean, you could just say over there, what other president of the United States or any world leader has said something like Bharat and America sabse achhe dost. So President's policies are very clear. I work closely with Mike Waltz, incoming NSA, and also Marco Rubio, who I have had a long relationship with. So the thoughts and the policies and of Indian and Hindu diaspora makes a significant difference. There's one particular aspect I would like to talk about where Indian diaspora can make a significant additional difference. The elephant in the room is China's ability to be the manufacturing center of the world. That focus needs to shift to India. Back to US, and what cannot be moved could be moved to India, like I talk about in the book, the creation of a new city which is free from any bureaucratic interference in India. And that, in my estimate, that city itself, just in electronics, because I'm in the electronics business, can bring $150 billion a year back to the United States, and $150 billion it could shift to India. And that's the biggest trump card there is on the table.
Right. Thank you so much, Mr. Kumar. The Trump card is what we are talking about in this high stakes presidency, and who is going to game that? Who is going to win? And there will be winners and losers. Ladies and gentlemen, friends, we have come to the end of the discussion. We can go on and on. It's a subject on which probably you can have a discussion forever, but we must conclude. So it's my pleasant duty now to thank all eminent speakers, Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, Dr. Mukesh Aghi, Mr. Shalabh Kumar, Mr. Vivek Lall in absentia, Mr. Michael Kagelman, Dr. Harinder Sikhon. The last 90 minutes have been such an enriching discussion that I would not, and such a multi-layered, nuanced discussion that I would not even dare to sum up multiple strands of this discussion, but just 2 or 3 quick takeaways. And I think by far, the consensus that emerged from this panel discussion is that India need not have Trump anxiety. By and large, India-US partnership will continue to thrive, probably scale new heights as well. Number 2, there will be some irritants, contentious issues on trade and tariffs, H-1B, and possibly other sources of dissonance. But with the very positive attitude, and the most important thing is the willingness of the America, and that consensus has been nurtured over the years to promote India's rise as a global power, which started during the first Bush presidency. I think there is by and large a bipartisan consensus, and Trump administration will continue with that. Defense relations will be on an upswing. Trade and investment, as Dr. Aghi pointed out, that despite some dissonance over tariffs, and that is a serious issue, the relationship will continue to be on an upswing. So there is largely optimism, and there are barely 5 days to go, and we'll see. The proof of the pudding lies in the eating of it. And yes, as of now, it seems like that India probably has a trump card, but how it plays out finally, there is no way. The 2 people you cannot predict what they will do next. One is Donald J. Trump, and another is Narendra Modi. So we don't know how it will all pan out in the end. But my profuse thanks to all the speakers and for a very tenacious audience who have stuck right till the end to follow this. The proceedings of this conference will be published on our website as well as in our magazine journal. We are also converting this into a set of recommendations, which we will share with all of you and also with the government and other key stakeholders. So thanks once again for joining this discussion, and do tweet about it, do write about it to my journalist friends. I request some media coverage. So thank you so much. We'll probably do another one after a fortnight after Trump takes over as 47th President of the United States. Goodbye and see you again. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Hello?
Hello?
Mr. Kumar, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I'm saying that I will write to your office, write to
Sure.
you. If we can find time, it would be good to have a detailed discussion. Also,
Okay.
I wanted to pick your brains on, this is not this is off the record, by the way.
Sure.
On, we are doing a project on, Republican Party per se and different factions and how it is playing out in all this. So it would be
No, say that
good
again.
to,
I didn't quite get
have
your
you
last word.
yeah.
No. What do you want to talk about? The
1 minute, sir. Yeah. 1 minute. Excuse me. इसको switch off कर दो ना. अच्छा ठीक है.